The industry's become less about the people doing the work and more about sort of the contracts and the administration process, which is completely backwards. There are two very different people that are good at building stuff and that are good at admin, which is sort of what a project manager is. Like I'd always say, like my dream team would be a site manager that knows how to build stuff and a project manager that is just good at managing stuff. I don't care what you can manage. If you know how to organize stuff, great. Pair them with a site manager that knows how to build stuff, dream team, solid.
Hi, Gavin Coyle. I'm the Gaffer back here again. I have a brilliant guest today. Josh Schumann is his name, and he is co-director of a company called Pepperbuild, which is a sort of like boutique builder, specialist builder in terms of dealing with high net worth individuals looking for obviously luxury accommodation or that sort of close relationship between builder and client. Very interesting guy. Got a lot to say to us about some of his consulting roles, which are really interesting, which is separate to his building company. But also he's got some harsh lessons learned that he's had in the recent past and he's still dealing with. And I think it's a very relevant topic that we're all sort of very scared about at the moment, or have been scared about in the past 24 months. And, you know, he could give us some of his experiences of dealing with that particular part of construction as it is today. And Josh is a trailblazer. He might be humble enough not to go there, but I can tell you, keep an eye on this guy because he's going to go places in terms of the construction industry. And we're delighted to have you on I'm the Gaffer, Josh. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It is a big pleasure to be here, and I'm quite excited to follow in the footsteps of some of the other guests who've already graced this podcast that you've grown from nothing in a year, which is
not even a year. At this stage we're up to 1 million viewers, as someone was saying there recently.
So absolutely incredible. It's great that we're getting so much traction of people wanting to learn more about construction and sharing knowledge in construction. For previously years, so many people have been so isolated. Everybody stays, contractors, they don't talk to other contractors. Developers don't really talk to other developers. But we all have lessons or tidbits or things that we've learned, things that can help us. So the more that people can share them, and even if you disagree with them, at least you go, well, I disagree with what that guy said, but actually that may turn cogs that I can then go, because I actually think it's better if I do it this way. Hearing as many different opinions is the best way.
Everybody's right.
What's it? There are two experts on both sides of an argument.
I think someone said to me about my wife recently. He said to me, I can't remember, what was it? Would you rather be happy or be right? Because she had said something and I would kind of like, no, I disagree with that. And your man just tapped me on the shoulder. Would you rather be happy or right? I said, I'll take happy.
Take happy.
With that, are you? Tell me a bit about yourself. Family? Are you married? Where did it all begin for you in terms of construction? Bring us up to date, I suppose, Josh.
So I started in construction 10 years ago. I came out of a very different path, and I fell into the industry. And I was given an opportunity to start at what was then a very small construction/development company. And I started as a QS, so quantity surveyor, which I knew nothing about. I did the RICS, I started doing the RICS exams, and sort of moved into that area, and I was fortunate that there were two people at the company who were significantly more experienced, so late 40s, 50s, and had been there, done it, and just knew. One of my favorite things is they could just price stuff because they just knew that that's just how the numbers worked in their head, versus having to get a spreadsheet out and look through books and all that sort of stuff. So it was interesting. I learned quite quickly that I don't particularly enjoy QSing side or elements of the QSing side. But I do think it's really important for people in construction to have some sort of financial understanding as to where the numbers all add together.
Okay. So when you were doing the QS, were you on the main contractor, principal contractor side, or were you on just the general sort of subcontractor?
So main contractor. So we were dealing obviously with all the subcontractors and
because you know where I'm going with this, like.
Go on.
Were you the one that was bashing the subbies?
No, I don't think I did. I mean, obviously, to an extent, but normally because I was told a number that it sort of needed to be.
Okay.
I mean, generally speaking, I don't. My QSing style. I mean, back then I was really young and naive. Like Jesus, I used to be on telephone calls with subcontractors or suppliers and be having to Google some of the words they said because I didn't have any idea what they were saying. So fortunately, I could type quite quickly and quietly. So you're just trying to have a conversation and extend it out slowly while you try and work out what on earth they've just asked you before you can come up with a response. But I mean, I don't particularly think there's a or at least back then it was just to do as you're told and try and learn and pick up and understand sort of how the pricing sort of works. I mean, fortunately at that stage, I think most of our contracts as the construction company were for a single developer, and most of them were cost plus contracts.
Okay.
And I will say this probably a couple of times in this podcast, but my view on contracts is I think that a cost plus contract is probably actually the best type of contract. And I think one of the biggest hindrances behind it is trust. The reason cost plus contracts don't work is because people don't trust.
And I'd probably throw in honour on that as well, trust and honour.
Yeah. Well, because people, they don't,
they could trust but not honour.
They manipulate it and do all sorts of weird stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm sure we'll track back. But so I started as a QS, and then sort of moved into procurement more just because of the size of the company. We didn't really have anybody focusing on procurement, which was great because it meant I got to deal with some of the massive companies, Travis Perkins, Jewson's, and the big guys.
Yeah.
But then also you get to deal with like the tiny guys, who, like small bathroom companies who like they have 3 employees and then that's it. And you sort of see the level of, or the quality of service between sort of the big guys and the small guys, and
you get a sense of the heartbeat.
Yeah, and the care, like the smaller guys, like they cared so much.
It's their everything.
It is their everything, and they would go bend over backwards and it'd be fantastic. But I have to say when you're dealing with an animal like TP, you are so reliant on the hand you get dealt with at the beginning.
Yeah.
So I was really fortunate that the person who was put in charge of our account was fantastic. He always went the extra mile. He'd always, find the answer if you needed it, because that's always the big problem with merchants is often I don't have all the information because I'm not an expert. If you think main contractors, you cover every single aspect of the industry, which is a huge range. So you can't expect to be the knowledgeable person in every field. Especially when you've only been doing it for like 2 years. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So you're wanting some feedback from the other person. So like if I order something, I need to know, do I need the other bits and pieces?
Yeah.
So like sanitary ware bathrooms, that's a great example because
brilliant. Yeah.
The spec will say, I want this tap.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, great, can I buy that tap? And then somebody will say, do you want all the stuff that goes with it, or that tap doesn't exist anymore, or it's not compatible?
Yeah. Do you want it on the right or the left?
Yeah. And like those are the bits where you go back to trust. You need to trust that your supplier is going to come back to you with the correct information.
Specification.
Yes, and I think that's the industry is all about the people in the industry.
Yeah.
And that's one of the areas where it doesn't matter where you are. If a main contractor or any contractor has to go into detail on every single thing that they buy, rather than just, it's not palming it off because you're saying, look, you're the expert in that field, please help me. And it's a business relationship that you provide me the product and your expertise, and I'll buy those off you. And I've always said, because I did some work with TP, Travis Perkins, in the years since, and my view has always been slightly towards it's not about cost, it's about value. So yes, something may cost slightly more, but if it saves you X amount of time or saves you one mistake, like we all know, mistakes in construction, they can balloon from hundreds of pounds to hundreds of millions of pounds. And that's sort of what you're relying on your subcontractors or your suppliers, is the value that they can give back to you.
Yeah. So, like, in terms of your background growing up, I just want to take a step back a bit. Why the hell did you get into construction?
So I said quite literally, I fell into construction. So if we rewind the clock further, so I started. Through education, I was always planning to be a vet. So equine vet.
Okay, this is getting interesting.
Yeah. So and that was purely. So my mother used to ride horses, so it's sort of I segued into that.
Yeah.
I spent most of my childhood around horses. All summer holidays was around horses. I come from a single parent family, so my mother would work long hours, and so I would just I was left at the yard, so it was free childcare essentially. I don't think you can do that anymore, but back then, like it gave me such a great childhood because my childhood was just outside, either riding horses or training horses or
mucking out or whatever.
And learning. I was mucking out for free, and you understand that sort of
contractual obligation.
Yeah.
If you want to get fed,
if you want to get fed, or you trade mucking out for lessons and that sort of stuff. So it was all there's no money trading hands, but there is some understanding of what hard work or work is.
Definitely resonate with the fact that there's a barter system in the horse industry where somehow there's a reluctance to actually put their hand in the pocket. It seems to be more of a trade.
Absolutely, much better to trade two things. Because there is no money in horses.
We'll give them a lesson. Yeah. No, do you know what? I'm actually starving. I won't even be able to get up on that horse. I'm that tired, but I have no energy.
The Leicester may have a monetary value of £80, but or £20 back then. But I spent my younger years around horses, and then I liked sciences at school. So at some young age, I decided I want to be a vet, and then did all my GCSEs and A levels. That's what I wanted to do, and then it was. And I've done veterinary work experience and all sorts of stuff. I've assisted on some minor surgeries and my time with horses was it definitely had an impact on my later life as far as understanding that horses are very. They're creatures, and you form partnerships with them, and I think that's sort of quite an important thing that a lot of people have. There's new things coming in where they're using horses to help with depression and anxiety and all those sort of areas.
ADHD, and all that kind of stuff.
Because it just when you're with a horse, it very much can calm you down because you focus.
They're very intuitive.
They are, and then, they feel fear and all sorts of stuff. I remember there was a story that my mother used to tell me. So when she was actually pregnant with me, she used to ride a mare who was a brood mare at the time, and the mare used to go down on her front knees to let my mum, who was pregnant at the time, get on.
Stop.
And that's it wasn't trained or anything fancy.
No
it was
way.
Literally just.
It wasn't a circus horse or anything.
Nothing weird or fancy. So it was, So as a child working, being around horses all the time. I was applying for vet schools and going around, and then I was actually like, I don't know if I want to be a vet.
Wow.
And at that stage, it was like I didn't really know what to do because if you run at something, you say, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to do.
It's very specific to say you want to be a vet.
Yeah, so it's specifically an equine vet. So
exactly.
That was it.
100%.
So I didn't. So I never went to veterinary school, and I never went to any university. So instead, my riding coach at the time said, "Look, why don't you just take a year off or something, and train horses?" So that's what I did. I took more than a year off, and basically lack of a better phrase, I played around with trying to be a horse trainer.
Like thoroughbreds?
So event horses.
Event horses,
yeah.
okay.
So by that point I was pushing towards eventing, which was a mistake because out of most of the disciplines, eventing is the one that's probably the least well funded.
Yeah, doesn't get as much eyes and ears.
No, like I could have done racing or polo or dressage or show jumping, which I've done all of those.
Or even the gigs over in America. Like.
But no. So I picked eventing stupidly, and
nobody watches it.
No, nobody watches it because it's so expensive. It's so expensive.
It is.
I mean, they watch like 3 events, but badminton, Burley, and
it's very elitism. At the sense of, like I was only talking to, and this has gone completely away from construction, but the money that people are paying for ponies it's insane, isn't it? It's like as if they're wearing a couple of Rolex watches in terms of the price of a pony.
So the numbers seem to have massively increased since COVID, and I only know this because I'm still very good friends with my previous boss, and the numbers have just increased, and I think it's because accessibility, and you've had new markets are becoming bigger players.
Okay.
So like America. Like if you watch the Olympics, you'll see that America seems to be rising in the amount of medals they win in the equine sports.
Okay.
Well, that doesn't happen if they're not interested. So there is like a big grassroots thing push in America. So they're spending more money, which therefore means there's more money coming into the sport, which then just balloons the cost of horses.
Wow.
So I mean, as I was sort of training horses, I then sort of found myself somehow working for. A fantastic guy, and probably I was lucky that he sort of became a bit of a role model for me. But he's on the Australian Olympic team in eventing, and I spent just over a year working for him. And I travelled around Europe, grooming at some of the best events that Europe has to offer, and properly working.
Yeah, it's a tough slog.
It's
12-hour days.
Absolutely, and more. I mean, I remember there were days that we'd be competing. So, like the one I remember vividly is we went to Holland for a competition over there, and obviously on the way back. So the last day is show jumping and prize giving. Mm-hmm. But obviously the evening before is cross country. So the evening before I hadn't slept because you're looking after the horse. Because again, the horses. People only care about the horse.
Yeah.
People will sacrifice everything else.
Yeah.
So people would give you. People would bring food to the stables because you're just there making sure that the horse is
looked after.
Is looked after, and I mean the dedication that some of the other grooms put in, like absolutely amazing. Like they care. They would sacrifice their lives or their well-being just to make sure that those horses were looking, feeling fantastic. But I think
they're the unsung heroes, really, aren't they?
Absolutely, and people in construction complain about low wages. Grooms are so underappreciated. The joke is being paid minimum wage in grooming would be a massive pay rise. And
not funny.
Look, it's not what this podcast is about, but there's always people who are paid less than you. But I think the interesting thing about horses is there's a huge amount of passion. Mm-hmm. And I think that's sort of that was the segue for me. So towards the end, so I had my top horse who, for those who don't know horses' digestive systems are really badly designed. So they get something called colic, which
is not good.
It's not great. So my horse had colic, which so there's an impaction in the intestine, and his intestine then got hooked over his spleen,
twisted,
which then meant he had to have surgery. But obviously, if you slice into something, most of the time you're not going to come back quite as good.
No.
And that was the problem. So he had the surgery and he didn't come back quite as good. So I had a horse that I'd trained up from. I think I bought him for sort of 5,000-10,000, trained him up, and he was starting to perform, and then he had colic, and then I made it. It was my choice then that I'd run out of passion a little bit, like the passion to money ratio was
not there,
tilting the wrong way, and I didn't have.
Imagine having sorry to cut across you, Josh, but imagine trying to have a family life, doing that job as well, like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of the grooms they don't.
They don't.
Because they
their family is the circuit.
Their family is literally it. It's the network they have around them, the horse they have around them, And then obviously it's a very physical role. So you get to a point, you know, similar in construction and the on-site people, you get to a point where you're going, physically, I'm struggling to be at the same pace and speed that I was beforehand.
Yeah.
And you're then trying to look for exits or outs.
So there's a lesson for construction owners: start looking at the grooms to bring them into. well, seriously, general operatives, and you know.
I mean, if you can bring that same sort of passion into construction.
Yeah, and dedication, work ethic.
Yeah,
and like they literally don't have. Like, don't tell me they're compliant with the Working Time Act. Like,
no,
they're not.
No, but you can't be. I mean, I guess, you know, obviously those regulations are in place to protect the human.
Yeah.
But if the human's job is to protect the horse, then and if something happens with the horse, you've got to, you know, I mean, you mentioned earlier, like some of these horses are ridiculously expensive. You know, they're hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, so the last horse I rode sold for 650 odd thousand.
Oh my God.
And I did that intentionally. Like, I intentionally was like, okay, that's. And that would be 11 years ago now. I stopped riding.
My God.
So I went from basically riding 5 to 6 horses a day to nothing overnight.
So go on. You went into the QS world then.
And then went into QSing. So let's dial this back. So for those of you who don't know, Gavin is Irish, so he also has a bit of a horse background just purely by being Irish.
Yeah. That's why I was nearly leaving as a horse podcast, but I was like, no. No, we love our horses in Ireland, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, great animals. And I mean, if anybody does, you know, we may touch on this, but like mental health in construction is becoming a huge issue at the moment. Animals, I think, are a great outlet. If it works for some people, it doesn't work for others.
Yeah, and you don't have to buy them. You can go to a riding school.
Yeah, like literally, you can go to a riding school. And it sounds, you know, obviously construction is about men and being manly and all that sort of stuff, and it sounds a bit weird, but even if you just go to a riding school and just brush the horse, it's amazing just having something that, you know, it's the same as if you have a dog, and you know the affection you get from a dog because they give
it back to you tenfold.
Yeah, and they don't care about anything else other than you, and you know,
it's unconditional.
Exactly. And I think that's obviously why it works. Yes, okay. Let's bring this back into the construction podcast. As I was leaving horses, I basically asked anybody I knew at that stage. I said, "Look, has anybody got? I don't know what I want to do because I still haven't worked it out. All I worked out is that I didn't want to be a vet because sort of 4 or 5 years had passed, or 4 years had passed by that point, and I'd sort of run out of passion for the horse thing, and didn't have the money to sort of kickstart the horse thing again." And somebody said, "Oh, you can, you know, a friend of mine's company, you can go and work for this guy." And basically I went to his house and, you know, sat down for sort of an interview, and he was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever, you can, you know, work here 3 days a week." And so I started working 3 days a week. Like, I didn't really know what I was doing. Yeah. I think the then director of the company I was working for, he was like, "Oh, not another, you know, what am I going to do with this guy?"
Yeah, where am I going to put him?
Yeah, basically. And I think since nobody really liked the QSing side, because QSing, like at that level, was just like moving numbers around.
Yeah.
I wasn't pricing stuff. I wasn't doing anything. I was literally just, here's a spreadsheet, just transfer these numbers to this spreadsheet and sort of understand it, and then start buying stuff, and then start just go and take off stuff. And like, I remember we were having an issue with a plasterer, and like, I had no idea how to use a tape measure.
Yeah.
Like, obviously I know how to use a tape measure, but like, he was, you know, I was really slow. And like, the plasterer was getting so frustrated that he started swearing at me, and then said that he would just measure the space that he'd done.
Yeah.
So I learned how to use a tape measure that day, so it was all good. But actually, that's quite interesting. Looking back, I did something that was stupid, as I didn't use the tape measure correctly. But I think that's a lesson that people can take away, is often asking dumb things or saying dumb things can be quite beneficial when you're trying to get a better response back. So plumbers are a great one. Often you know, if they suggest a scenario, just suggest something random. It may not work, it may be a load of crap, but they then may rethink something and go, you know, or just ask why. Like, why are you doing it that way? And I think you can get away with it significantly more when you're younger.
Yeah.
I think obviously the older I get, the harder it is. But lesson for like the younger people listening, ask questions, because nobody is going to say, oh, if somebody says you're an idiot, go away, then
I know there's people screaming at the
yeah,
there's people screaming at the screen here, or the radio or whatever, or the phone, and saying, plumbers, yeah. Out of every other trade that you could pick, and don't get me wrong, plumbers, but like any plumbers I've come across, they all have their own way of doing things. They all have their own pump that they like to use. They all have their own wrench. They have their own twisting mechanisms, and they have everything. And it's their system is the right system, and everybody else is wrong. And then you bring in and they talk to another plumber 6 months later, and he's a totally different way of doing things. And then, well, no, this other plumber done it differently. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah. Well, they always go and say, "Oh, what a mess this guy before."
Yeah,
done,
yeah,
and,
100%.
This would never work. Oh, you need to rip it all out again.
Yeah, God, he didn't do it.
Yeah.
Did you actually sign off on this stuff? When you look at it, you say, "Oh, well, maybe I actually made a big mistake here," and then you just go, "No," because and out of don't get me wrong, but I think most people concur that plumbers, especially, they're unique, aren't they?
Absolutely, and I mean they. It's funny because if I could ever do this journey again, I would probably have trained as a plumber.
Yeah.
Which amusingly, over the last 10 years, the way that software and tech has gone, especially in education,
yeah,
I think that would have been a great profession to go into. I still think it is a great profession to go into.
It is, yeah.
And 15, 20 years ago, being a plumber or an electrician was really seen as like a second tier job.
Yeah.
But there's many plumbers that are driving around in Range Rovers with no debt, because they charge for physical things. Everybody poops and everybody wants fresh water. So those are two things that are never going to change.
And there's a lot of verticals in that industry, in the sense of the retrofit market. You look at the solar panels, you're looking at air to water, heat pumps, geothermal, whatever. So there's a lot of verticals that are making people,
and you learn a proper physical skill.
Yeah.
Which if I was in government, I think the point there should be so much more focus put back to the physical skills that people don't have. I remember stories from 2 generations beforehand where. You know it more about America, where they used to have shop class, where they used to learn how to fix a car.
Yeah.
And obviously nobody can fix an electric car now because they're too complicated.
Yeah.
But that sort of stuff, you should be able to learn. You should be able to know the basics, because AI is never going to be able to replace that bit.
Yeah.
Some sort of self-sufficiency. But no, plumbers, you're fantastic. Please don't overcharge me. You do already. So
tell me this. While I have you, just to put the handbrake on a bit. What's wrong with construction in its current form?
I think construction has become... there's a lot of blame in construction. I think that's probably the first place to start. So one of my favourite things to mention is if we talk about house building. So you've got a house and you want me to build it as your builder. So you ask me to price it, and you then say you're going to stick to that price, and obviously if you change your mind then there's variations, but you want me as the builder to take all the risk to build your house. And that seems quite odd, because most of the time in that process you've probably squeezed the builder down in cost. The builder has then in turn squeezed their subcontractors down to make it all work. And construction companies aren't turning over, they're turning over massive amounts of money, but they're not making massive amounts of profit. So most companies, the profit margins are somewhere between the larger projects are 3 to 5%, medium-sized projects maybe 10 to 15%. Some specialty projects and smaller projects tend to go between the 20 and 40%. But your general contractor is 10%, which on £1 million worth of work or £1 million job will cover 1 or 2 mistakes, and you have so many variables. So if I go back to the beginning with that, is you as the client have told me to reduce my cost, minimize the amount of contingency I have, and take all the risk for your house. And that's the bit that I think is sort of difficult to sort of swallow. if I said to you, do you want to take on £1 million worth of risk, and I'll give you, £80,000 out of the end of it,
You wouldn't do it.
you'd be like, oh, that sounds a bit crazy.
Yeah.
And that's generally what construction is at the moment.
Yeah.
Because by the time you add on retention, which is standard 5%, and obviously you get 2% half at the end of the contract, and then you may get the other 2%, a year later.
Yeah.
All you're doing is you're just hampering cash flow.
Yeah. You're hemorrhaging.
And you just get stuck. So we go back to something we started right at the beginning, which was trust. So the model that I'm trying to push with Pepper Build is, if you don't think you could sit down and have a beer with your preferred contractor and just chat, then probably they're not the contractor for you. Because the money side of things is very changeable, because a lot of it's fixtures, finishes, how it's built, when it's built, how quick it's built, whether you change your mind 7 times or never, how many variations there are. There are so many other things that come into it, rather than just, can you build my house? What's the number? Now build it at that price. And going through and this is before you go through the COVID period, where you had massive inflation prices and everyone's stuck on a fixed price contract. But if you've got a fixed price contract over 2 years,
you're in trouble.
Absolutely. And that's why we're seeing this sort of series of administrations that are going through, which is causing massive issues for the industry. But I don't see any change. The JCT contract is still the preferred contract style, which still puts most of the onus on the contractor rather than the client. And I sort of feel like it should be a shared responsibility.
It should be flexible anyway. There should be some sort of a mediation process where you don't have to get to a legal process. That's the honour, integrity, and the goodwill of the contract can be overarching before you actually put the hammer down and say, well, actually it's black and white. So
I mean, I think
if you've signed it, so.
if your project gets to the stage where you have to pull out the JCT contract, you probably should just walk away at that stage, because if you don't feel that you can have an amicable conversation with somebody, and this is. So my experience is residential, so I'm talking residential. Infrastructure projects, large developments is a different sort of story.
Different model,
and because that's what the JCT contract is built for.
Yeah.
Is it built for your, single person house refurb, of £1 million or £500 or probably not. It's a very big contract. I mean, it's like 80 pages, or I don't know how many pages it is anymore. And that's sort of where you want to have trust and faith in the person that you're employing, to the same way that I hope to have trust and faith in my subcontractors. You as the client want to have the same thing, and it's a team process to build these things. I think too many times it somehow becomes like opposite sides of the table. On one side of the table you'll have the client, you'll have the design team and any client consultants, and then the other side of the table you've got the contractor. Well, the contractor's obviously only doing the job to make money. And I think that's something people are weirdly afraid of in construction, and needs to be clear. Generally, the only reason people build stuff is to make money. They're not doing it. Some of it is fun. Sure, that's great. But realistically, we're only doing this to make money so that we can pay salaries and everybody can get paid. That is the pure reason that we do this. Otherwise,
what are we doing it for?
What are we doing it for?
You mentioned administration earlier on. Are you comfortable sharing your own story in that, with the background?
Yeah, so the company that I was previously working for, I worked for them for just under 10 years. And over those 10 years, it grew quite drastically from the amount of people that we had. The original model was more, we worked for a couple of developers. And as those developers sort of quietened down, we then expanded into more and more private client work. The more private client work you have, the more client teams you deal with, therefore the more layers you sort of end up accumulating, so more QSs, more PMs. And then you end up on this sort of roller coaster of, it's actually quite expensive to stand still as a construction company. There's a lot of cost in hiring project managers who are good, because good project managers are expensive, and they should be because it's a very skilled job. So unfortunately, we got to a time we managed to make it through COVID, and at the beginning of this year, so beginning of 2024, unfortunately, that company had to go into administration because it couldn't support itself. There were mistakes made on. The company sort of expanded into the Cotswolds, and there were sort of mistakes made in some of those contracts, and there wasn't enough capacity for that to be absorbed by the company, essentially, which was, pretty devastating for. Not even including the people that worked there, but the subcontractors, because we'd built a group of subcontractors that we had massive amounts of trust and
goodwill.
Yeah, like some of those guys, they would be one of the first couple of people that I called when I first started, 10 years ago. So seeing it all sort of crumble was a real shame, and it sort of seeing more of the there's been a lot of administrations of construction companies over the last 2 years, and I'm fairly sure there are going to be more in the coming 1 to 2 years, because there's so much risk into construction. If you have a mistake, normally the contractor has to suffer that, and they hold that, and then you're waiting for the next project to come through. So you end up in this
pyramid.
And you're basically just steamrolling through. And the moment that you have a turnover drop, you can no longer just keep passing it on.
Yeah.
And then when you add on the top that you've got some clients don't pay you, why don't they pay you? I don't know, because they just don't want to pay you. And then you take them to court, and then they go, oh, they've gone bankrupt. And you go, well, where does this leave us?
Yeah.
Or they flee the country, or they just never respond to anything. So those are just, so not only have you got to try and manage the on-site and fix any mistakes or things that happen, but you're then trying to manage the client's finances as well, even though they said that they would pay the valuation. Some of these valuations were agreed, and then you can just never get the money.
Yeah.
And then, final accounts and retention payments. Depending on who the client is, you just never get it. Like there was one developer that we worked with foolishly that so he'd never pay the final account, but he'd say, look, here's another project.
Yeah.
And you'd be like,
the old one.
Yeah. And
out of the bag. Oh, look at this shiny thing over here. Stop looking at that one.
Exactly. and then you're just like, okay, fine, we'll do the next project. And then you go, and then you're covering the final account on the next project. But
yeah, you're rolling it.
You're rolling it. And I think that's the big problem with construction, because each project isn't isolated in its own entity. And I think it's a tricky thing to do, and maybe at some stage, as pricing softwares change, and it'll be more clear to sort of fix costs in. But broadly, it just comes down to construction is very expensive, and when something's very expensive, people don't like paying OH&P, overheads and profit, because it's a bigger number. So if you look at other industries, look at the tech industry.
Doesn't help your plumber turns up in a Range Rover, but
it doesn't. Well, so that's it's a great point, because I'd love to know, like the subcontractors below us,
we're making more money.
They're making more money.
Yeah. They don't have the sleepless. Well, they have sleepless.
They have
nights,
sleepless nights, but they have sleepless nights on one aspect, where versus the main contractor has sleepless nights on so many different aspects that you're trying to pull together. And as I said, you're doing that for like £80,000 on a £1 million project.
Yeah. There's no room for mistake.
There's no room for mistakes. So it's there's no real way to fix that without people paying more money.
So give me the biggest lesson learned out of that company going bust. Was it corporate governance? Was it lack of leadership? Was it process and systems? Just in your own opinion, you don't have to be right, obviously. I gave you an out.
If I don't have to be right. I think it's probably a combination. I mean, leadership is always an interesting one, because realistically, if a company fails, then you have to look at the people who are in the company, and I don't even just mean the people at the top. It's anybody who has all the levels down.
An impact on it.
So to some aspect, I need to take responsibility for it going as well, because look, I was there for long enough, and But then a lot of it is, if you've never been in that situation before, it's very hard to start ringing alarm bells when you don't really know what you're meant to be looking for.
And nobody tells you, by the way, I'm going to be out of cash in the next 18 months, so you better leave me.
But also, so that's construction.
Yeah.
Like construction companies, like my favorite thing is you get a PQQ, pre-qualification questionnaire. And always on that it'll ask you for your last 5 years accounts.
Yeah.
And I've always thought that's a hilarious thing to add on, because most construction companies, their final accounts, like they're not going to be 100% true, because you'd never pick a construction company that's making 50% profit. Like, why would you do that? Well, they're clearly going to charge me far too much. I'm not going to pick one that's making no money, because obviously if they make no money, that's not sustainable. And if you look at most accounts for construction companies, they all make like a little bit of money. So like they're valueless. And I had an argument with I had a disagreement with a QS for our new company. He said that they didn't want to go with us because we were a brand new company. And I said, that's great. I have no debt. I have no baggage. I have no historical projects. Like literally the only reason that my company can fail is if your client doesn't pay us. Because I have nothing else. And he's like, yeah, no, but we need 5 years worth of accounts.
Yeah.
And I said, well, 5 years worth of accounts just means you have 5 years of debt, baggage and stuff on, I'm guaranteed somebody hasn't paid you or something in the last 5 years. But going back to the question, lessons learned from, so I think one of the first ones would be spending more time trying to understand how much it costs for you to stand still. Because there are a lot of extra things that are missed in pricing. Because prelims and overheads, those are the two things that clients that always get picked up on. Nobody wants to pay prelims and nobody wants to pay overheads. I'll segue again quickly. I had a meeting once, and it was a job. It was going to be about 11 months, but let's say 12 months. And they didn't like it I had a line item for site manager, 65,000. They didn't want to pay that. And I said, well, your job is 12 months long. It cost me £65,000 to hire a site manager. Thus, you need to pay £65,000. Otherwise, you can have no site manager. Like, those are your options. You need, and there are so many variables. So you've got insurances that come in. You've got obviously rents that come in. You've got business rates that come in. You've got employee salaries you come in. But remember, employee salaries aren't how much you pay them. It's how much it costs you.
You have leases. You've got rents. You've got
all those things massively scale up. So when you really want to understand how much it costs for your company to stand still. Like
it just gets me. I talk to people in construction owners, and they say, like, have you built a risk register for your business? And they think, oh, like for health and safety. I said, no, just a business risk register for your business. Like, I know it's an ISO term, but it's you wouldn't believe the amount of companies that don't actually have a business risk register. And that risk register changes every year.
Yeah.
And some things that mightn't be a priority this year will become a priority maybe in the next week, the next month. So you have to be tracking it every 2 months and stuff like that. Like, I don't know, we talked about the construction industry and where it's going, and the risk that's on the table for a lot of people, especially listening to this show, and we try and give back as much as we can to try and appreciate you sharing that story as well with them. But in terms of your tech world experiences, because that obviously flows into construction as well, and I know you're passionate about both, give us a sense of what you're doing in the tech space, along with everything else that you're doing at the moment, by the way.
So my hope is that some of the tech that comes out will help sort of save the construction industry. I think something I said earlier was that the industry's become less about the people doing the work and more about sort of the contracts and the administration process, which is completely backwards. They're two very different people that are good at building stuff and that are good at admin, which is sort of what a project manager is. Like I'd always say, like my dream team would be a site manager that knows how to build stuff and a project manager that is just good at managing stuff. I don't care what you can manage. If you know how to organize stuff, great. Pair them with a site manager that knows how to build stuff, dream team, solid. Obviously, if you can do both, fantastic. Well done. You deserve a pay rise. As far as software, so there's a couple of bits. So I first sort of ventured into construction software maybe about 6 years ago, because I was trying to find, like, there's so much data in construction, especially as a main contractor. Drawings, RFIs, purchase orders, submittal requests.
Yeah, it's endless.
It's ridiculous, and
Yeah.
everybody's using Excel spreadsheets and OneDrive
Yeah.
folders,
Yeah.
which are they're fine, but nobody. The Excel spreadsheets, like I saw one a year or so ago, and it was first made in 1997. And I said to the guy who gave it to me, I said, like, do you even know how to use this? And he was like, no, you just fill in the colored bits. And I was like, no, but do you know what the formulas do? Do you know where they go? Like, do you have any? And like, that's scary. Like, you can massively misprice something because you don't know the bit of software. You don't understand the Excel spreadsheet. So at that time, I was looking for a project management software, and we looked at non-construction ones, so Asana and Monday, and then I came across Procore, and my claim to fame is that, so the company then, they were the first official UK signing of the Procore London office. So that was like quite a cool thing, and that was sort of my start into realizing that potentially, like, there's a lot of software that can help organize a fairly chaotic industry. And so from there, like, one of my big takeaways is, and I think the COVID era, there's been a massive boom in construction software. Like, if you can find a project management software that works for you, they will save you mistakes. And I chose my words carefully there, because they'll sell it to you as they'll save you time. And I sort of disagree with that terminology, because, like, time is something that can get flitted away and lost very easily. But mistakes is a very numerical thing. Like, if you have a job and you make no mistakes, you will make money. Yeah. If you make one mistake, that will cost you X amount of money. And if you can just stop those mistakes from piling up, that's how you save money. And then that's how you value the software. So, I think back then we were sort of paying around £20,000 to £30,000 a year for that software. But it was a case of, if you're turning over £25 million, that's not even one mistake. Like, to accidentally do something that, over the course of a couple of projects, that can quite easily, come back. So through there, I've sort of ventured through into bits of other software. So I spent a bit of time doing some consulting work for a company called Flip. Now they are sort of trying to revolutionize the way that people sell houses. So the best scenario case is, let's say you've inherited a flat. Nothing. It still looks like it hasn't been touched since the 80s, and you can sell it at that value, and you may get, you'll get a percentage below market value because it's a bit rubbish. So that's where you can speak to Flip, and then they will generate a design for you, and carry out all the work, which means
physically carry
out all the work. So they'll employ they have a team. They have a couple of teams that they go to, and so their model is trying to sort of digitize the refurb process. Okay. So basically, they go, your house is this big, the demographic of this area is this, the value of the property is this, so your ideal client is this.
Brilliant.
So that's the ideal person buying it, and because of that's the ideal person, we can design the house out of one of these to meet those designs.
Persona.
Exactly.
Wow.
So then they go, look, you need to spend X amount of money on it, but we'll pay for that. So Flip will pay for that upfront. So they'll deal with that, and then they take that out of the sale price once you sell it, because they know that they're going to sell it for a higher price.
Brilliant. Is that live?
Yeah. So they're live. They're doing really well. So obviously the model changes depending on how the property market changes, but they're looking to sort of integrate more clever AI bits into sort of automated pricing. So the way that they tender to subcontractors is they sort of say, this is how much it is. Can you do this? So they'll say, it's 20,000. Do you want it? And then the subcontractor can make a decision as to whether they want to do that. They can go, well, actually, I can do that for 15K, and they're going to give me 20. So great. let's do it.
Yeah.
Or they may go, actually, look, it's, I'm not really going to make it. It's not going to work for me. And I sort of quite like that way of pricing, because like one of the annoyances when I speak to private clients is I'll say to them, like, what's your budget? And they go, I don't know, I'm waiting for you to tell me. Well, no, you know how much you have available to spend on this house. So let's start with that number. Like, keep some secret, sure, whatever, but give me a starting number. Because if you say your budget's
amount of money, like in month 3,
or if I say like it's like 3 times what you think it is, you'll get scared and you'll never do it.
Yeah, I think a better way of putting it is how much cash can you put your hand on if I need to ring you on Friday and say everybody needs to be paid?
Yeah.
Do you know? It's another podcast on that one itself. Tell us about there's another tech business, isn't there?
So the other one is called NavLive, and this is really quite exciting, because this is definitely cutting edge.
And you're involved with that as
another consultant. So this is the reason that I was involved in this. So it's a product that came out of Oxford University, and they developed a surveying device which creates a point cloud. And while they're developing it, they were sort of trying to find what industry to market it into. Like, is this a saleable product? And I met the CEO sort of randomly. Actually, I met him at one of the build shows, I think at Olympia, and they'd sort of started to look into the construction industry. And obviously, the first thing you need if you're doing a refurb of a house is you need a floor plan.
Yeah.
Now, what this device does is
an accurate floor plan.
An accurate floor plan. Well done. Yeah. None of those agent floor plans are a complete load of crap. So you need an accurate floor plan. So what this product is it's a handheld device, and you literally just walk around the building. So if you see it, it sees it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's got a LiDAR, and it's got 3 cameras, and it's got an NVIDIA chip, and everything happens on the device. So as you're walking around, you can literally see the floor plan being generated on the screen.
Brilliant.
So by the time you finish walking around, you hit save, you can export your floor plan straight into Autodesk or Revit or whatever design software you want to go, and you're done.
You're done.
Now, accuracy levels, so I think we're sort of looking at about 1 to 100 scale, so more than sufficient for construction. We're looking to come into an open beta phase in December. So I'll take the opportunity to say, if you are interested, the company is NavLive, NavLive. .ai. You can sign up.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. That wasn't rehearsed. I just went in there. It may get cut out later.
No.
But the reason why is the big bit that we need to do is there's a lot of computer learning that goes into it. So it needs to understand what a door is. Now, there are lots of different types of doors. You know what a door looks like because you've seen lots of doors, but a computer literally sees shapes.
Yeah.
So a commercial door is very different to a residential door. And so we did a scan with sliding doors, and they were like, well, what the hell is this? How do you... Yeah. So then they had to write a whole load of code just to understand what a sliding door is. And if it's half open or a quarter open.
Complex.
Massively complicated. So we're really keen to get people trying it so that basically we can get as much feedback on picking up the mistakes.
It's amazing. That's like, have you not enough going on in your life without sort of a couple of tech businesses? You got your property business going on.
I got a very nice girlfriend that affords me the time to do this. I also do triathlons. And I used to.
Well, tell me this. So time wise, we're running out of time. But tell us some curveballs, I suppose, at you, if you don't mind. Knowing what you know now, what would you do different?
Leave school when I was 16 and be a plumber.
And drive a Range Rover.
I joke, but I actually think that's really good advice for anybody who's younger. Is don't get caught up in the AI thing.
Yeah. Don't chase the money.
Yeah. Don't chase perceived money. Learn a skill. 100%.
That you're excited about.
Yeah. And like you may get excited. So obviously I fell into construction, but the bit that excites me more and more is where it's going as far as the software side goes, as that sort of blows up.
Tell me this, favorite book?
Favorite book is would be the Lord of the Rings series. It's obviously very big and popular, but the point of that is that you can do pretty much anything you want if you have the support of and the belief of the people around you.
Wow.
So find
You're
your Gandalf.
making that connection. Wow.
Yeah.
Favorite movie?
Favorite movie? Probably most Western films.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I could pick a favorite one, but like anything with a Western film, I don't know, maybe it's the horse thing, but yeah, like Westerns. It always amazed me that the cowboy period was like nothing. It was like 30 years or something.
Yeah. Something about you that not many people would recognize or would say, I never knew that about Josh.
It would probably be either the fact that I started in horses, or if you haven't spoken to me or know anybody around me, then it's that I now do ultra running and triathlons and have sort of really got into that. Obviously, as a kid, I was not sporty at all.
Yeah.
I started running. I did a 10K run in Nairobi because I was over there doing some work for a startup gym company, and then that went from there on to, I think 3 years later I did an Ironman and full Ironman, and then I've now, what was it? I think 4 months ago, I ran up and down Snowdon 6 times in 21 hours because I don't know, it seemed like a fun thing to do. I mean, it's like I like pushing myself mentally into stuff, and I think that's what the endurance sports are. Like I'm not a fast athlete. I'm just definitely somebody who.
I can tell you this from this show: you're an endurance person in general. You don't have to be an athlete to put at the end of the word endurance, because between starting up in the horse industry, a vet, a groom, a QS, a tech expert, starting up gyms over in Nairobi, and then running a construction business, a successful construction business might add as well. It's credit to you, like you've a bundle of energy. I don't know where you get it from, but more and more people like yourself needed in construction. Obviously, you've got great enthusiasm, you've got great motivation. We love to have you on the podcast. You were amazing guests. Definitely come back in the future, because I'm sure the story is not finished. Absolutely,
appreciate it. Thank you for your time, and hopefully people have learned from this. And if you've got any more questions, then feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if there's a software that you go, I wish something did this, reach out to me, because there probably is something that does that already, or there's a team looking for people to test their product. So.
Is Josh Schumann on LinkedIn, or is there a website, or
just Josh Schumann on LinkedIn? I respond to all my DMs.
Okay. Josh, look after yourself. It's a pleasure, and thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.